I moved my entire family across the country for what was supposed to be the opportunity of a lifetime. We sold our house, pulled our kids out of school, and said goodbye to everything familiar, because I trusted a company that promised me stability and purpose. 4 days after we arrived, they fired me without an explanation that made any real sense. Just a cold video call and a 2-week severance. What happened next? I didn't crawl back. I didn't beg for my job. I built something of my own, something they never saw coming. Please subscribe to this channel, like this video and drop a comment. I'll be reading everything. Your position is no longer available, the HR director said. Unfortunately, plans have changed. I felt my entire body go cold, like someone had replaced my blood with ice water. The HR director's face on my laptop screen showed exactly zero emotion as she delivered the news that would destroy everything I'd spent the last 3 months building. 3 months of packing, of promising the kids everything would be okay, of convincing my husband this move was our future. I'm 37 years old, and exactly 4 days after moving my entire family 2,800 miles across the country, the job I was promised vanished with a single sentence. Before I continue with how this nightmare unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. I remember sitting there in our half-unpacked rental house, surrounded by boxes labeled in my careful handwriting, kitchen, son's bedroom, daughter's books, staring at the woman who looked uncomfortable, but not nearly uncomfortable enough for what she was doing to my life. I don't understand, I said, my voice coming out embarrassingly small. I signed a contract. We sold our house in Portland. My husband resigned from his practice. We enrolled our children in schools here. She cleared her throat. The company has undergone some restructuring decisions. The integration team is being downsized before it's even formed. Legal has advised we can terminate within the probationary period. You'll receive 2 weeks severance as a courtesy. A courtesy. 2 weeks of salary as a courtesy, after we'd uprooted our entire lives to move from Oregon to North Carolina. Can I speak with the CTO? I asked, referring to the executive who had recruited me, who'd spent months convincing me that my expertise in healthcare data integration was exactly what they needed for their expanding medical records division. He is no longer with the company, she said flatly. That's when I understood. This wasn't just about me. This was a company in freefall, cutting costs wherever they could. I was collateral damage in someone else's financial planning. I wish I could tell you I stood up for myself, that I threatened legal action or demanded proper compensation. But shock does strange things to you. Instead, I thanked her. Actually thanked her for letting me know. I wished her well and disconnected the call. Then I walked into our bathroom, turned on the shower, sat down on the tile floor, and sobbed until the water ran cold. How was I going to tell my husband? He had given up his physical therapy practice of 12 years, his patients, his colleagues, the clinic he'd helped build from nothing, all because I convinced him this opportunity was worth it. It's a director-level position, I'd told him. The salary is enough that you can take your time finding the right practice here. Maybe even start your own. And our kids. God, our kids. Our son was 15 and already hated me for making him leave his friends before his sophomore year. Our daughter was 8 and struggling with dyscalculia, a math learning disability that had taken us 2 years to get properly diagnosed and accommodated at her old school. We'd been assured the private school here in Raleigh had resources for her. The tuition deposit alone was non-refundable, $3,800. I sat on that cold bathroom floor for what felt like hours, my mind racing through calculations. Our savings would cover maybe 3 months if we were careful. The housing market in Portland had exploded after we sold. We couldn't afford to go back even if we wanted to. My husband couldn't get his old job back. They'd already hired his replacement. I heard the front door open. He was back from taking the kids to tour their new schools. "You home?" he called, his voice echoing through the hollow rental. I shut off the shower and caught my reflection in the mirror. Eyes swollen, face blotchy. There was no hiding this. When I told them, my husband just sat down heavily on one of our kitchen boxes. He didn't say anything for a long time. Our son kicked the wall hard enough to leave a dent we'd never get back from our security deposit. Our daughter crawled into my lap and asked if this meant we could go home. I didn't have the heart to tell her we didn't have a home to go back to. That night, after the kids were asleep, we sat on our mattress on the floor. We hadn't even set up our bed frame yet. "What are we going to do?" he asked, staring at the ceiling. I'd spent the afternoon sending desperate emails to my network, updating my LinkedIn, and applying to every remotely relevant position in the Raleigh area. I'll find something else, I said, with more confidence than I felt. I have interviews lined up already. This was technically true. One interview. With a company that paid 40% less than what I was promised. And if you don't? He asked. I didn't answer. We both knew what retail and food service jobs paid. We both knew what our daughter's special education needs cost. We both knew how thin our safety net was stretched. The next morning, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to the company's gleaming headquarters, the building I'd toured just 4 months ago, where I'd met the team I would never lead, where the CTO had shown me the corner office that would have been mine. I sat in the parking lot for almost an hour, rehearsing what I would say if I marched in there demanding to speak to whoever was in charge. I imagined myself being firm but professional. I imagined them realizing their terrible mistake. I imagined a lot of things that would never happen. In the end, I didn't go in. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop and spent 6 hours applying for jobs, making connections, and fighting the rising panic that threatened to drown me. 3 weeks passed. The rejections piled up, overqualified, not quite the right fit, went with an internal candidate. My husband found part-time work at a rehab center. Barely enough to cover groceries. Our son stopped speaking to me entirely. Our daughter's new school called about adjustment concerns. Then I got the call. It was from a hiring manager at a major healthcare competitor. I heard what happened, she said. That company is a mess right now. Half their leadership team has jumped ship. I noticed, I said dryly. We have a position that might interest you. Not director level, but senior manager. The compensation package is competitive. It was 15% less than what I'd been offered at my old job, but 30% more than anything else I'd found. I scheduled the interview for the following day. That same evening, my phone lit up with a North Carolina number I didn't recognize. Is this Mrs. Mercer? A man's voice asked, tense and tired. Yes, who's calling? CEO of the company. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I've just learned about your situation, the termination of your contract, he said. He sounded genuinely uncomfortable. I want to personally apologize. This should never have happened. I appreciate that, I said carefully, not giving him anything. The fact is, he continued, we're in a difficult position. The medical conversion project was 6 weeks behind schedule. The client was threatening to pull out entirely. The interim integration director didn't understand the proprietary architecture, and the documentation was insufficient. I almost laughed. I knew exactly what they were talking about. That project had been discussed extensively with the previous CTO. It was a $40 million contract to migrate a regional hospital network's patient data to the company's platform. It was also the main reason they'd recruited me. I'd done similar migrations 3 times before. That sounds challenging, I said, keeping my voice neutral. We'd like to bring you on as a consultant to help navigate this situation. Premium rates, of course, triple your original salary, prorated for the 8-week project duration. Now I did laugh. A short, sharp sound that made the CEO pause. 4 weeks ago, your company left my family financially devastated and emotionally shattered. Our 15-year-old son isn't speaking to me. Our 8-year-old daughter cries herself to sleep. My husband gave up a 12-year career. And now you want me to bail you out of a crisis I specifically warned your CTO about during my interviews. Silence on the line. I understand your frustration. No, you don't, I cut in. But thank you for the offer. I wish you the best of luck with the client. I hung up before they could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone. My husband looked up from the job listings he'd been scrolling through. Who was that? The company, I said. They need help with the project. His eyes widened. What did you tell them? I told them no. He ran his hands through his hair. We need the money. I have an interview tomorrow. And if that doesn't pan out, we have 6 weeks of mortgage payments left before we're completely underwater. He was right. But something had crystallized inside me during that call, a cold, clear certainty. I'm not helping them, I said. Not after what they did. He didn't argue further, but I could see the worry lines deepening around his eyes. I barely slept that night. By morning, I'd made a decision that would either save us or sink us completely. The interview went well. The hiring manager was sharp, direct, and clearly valued my experience. But when she asked if I had any questions, I took a deep breath and stepped off a cliff. Actually, I'm considering starting my own consultancy, I said. Would your company be open to contracting with an independent firm rather than hiring me directly? She studied me for a long moment. Potentially. What services would your firm provide? Specialized integration of healthcare data systems, migration management, compliance oversight. The same expertise you'd be hiring me for, but with more flexibility for both parties. And this firm exists. As of this morning, I slid my newly printed business card across the table. I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. registering the business, creating a simple website, and designing those cards at a 24-hour print shop. It was a gamble so massive it made my stomach hurt. She picked up the card, her expression unreadable. Bold move. It's either bold or desperate, I admitted. I'm not sure which yet. She actually smiled at that. Let me discuss this with my team. A consultancy arrangement might solve several issues for us, especially given the other company's current difficulties. As I drove home, my phone rang again. It was the CEO. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. The fourth time, I answered. Please reconsider. The medical situation is deteriorating. We're prepared to offer you a permanent position, director level, with a significant signing bonus to compensate for the disruption. I'm no longer available for employment offers, I said calmly. However, my consultancy might be able to assist you. Our standard rate for crisis intervention is $400 per hour, with a minimum commitment of 200 hours. The silence on the other end was deafening. That's more than double what we were offering. Yes, I agreed. It is. And I require 50% upfront, non-refundable. If you're interested, I can have a contract to you this afternoon. If not, I wish you the best with the client. This feels punitive. Not at all, I said, my voice honey-sweet. This is simply the market rate for solving the problem you created. My family has expenses. My business has overhead. You're welcome to find another solution if mine doesn't work for you. I hung up and pulled into our driveway, my heart hammering. Had I just destroyed our last chance at financial recovery, or had I finally found a way to take back control? Inside, my husband was waiting, his face tense. How did it go with the hiring manager? I set my purse down carefully. I told them I'm starting my own company. His expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something close to anger. You did what? And the other company just called again. I told them they could hire my company at $400 an hour. Have you lost your mind? We can't afford to gamble like this. I know it sounds crazy, I said, taking his hands. But think about it. They are desperate. That client is their biggest account. If they lose this contract, they'll be in serious trouble, and I'm the only one who can fix their problem in time. And if they say no, then the hiring manager might become my first client instead. She seemed interested. He pulled his hands away, pacing our small living room. This is our lives. You're gambling with our children's security. I know, I whispered. But I can't go back to working for people who treated us like we were disposable. I can't. My phone buzzed with an email from the CEO. We accept your terms. Contract needed ASAP. Client representatives arriving Monday. I showed the email to my husband, whose eyes widened. They actually agreed to $400 an hour. They did. I felt lightheaded. That's $80,000 for 6 weeks of work. If you deliver, he reminded me. I will. I'd never been more certain of anything. And this is just the beginning. He stared at me like he was seeing someone new. Maybe he was. Maybe I was becoming someone new. Someone who wouldn't be broken by betrayal, but instead would rebuild something stronger from the pieces. That night, I sat at our kitchen table drafting the contract that would either save us or become evidence of my hubris. I included clauses about intellectual property, scope limitations, payment schedules. I was creating armor, protecting myself from ever being vulnerable to these people again. My phone buzzed with another email, this time from the hiring manager. Proposal approved. Can you meet Thursday to discuss specifics? Particularly interested in your insights on the project. I stared at the screen. A plan crystallizing in my mind. Not revenge exactly, something more elegant. Something that would transform the power dynamic permanently. I was going to make myself essential to both companies. I was going to build my consultancy on the very expertise they had discarded. And I was going to make sure they never forgot the woman they thought they could simply erase. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt since before the move. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel that crushing weight on my chest, that sense of drowning while everyone watched. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar. A cold, precise focus. I spent that entire day working out exactly how to thread this needle. The company needed me to save their medical project, their biggest client, a hospital network whose entire patient database needed migration to their system. Another organization wanted insights on the company's architecture. Not quite industrial espionage, but dancing along that edge. I wasn't going to betray either one. I would serve both exceptionally well while ensuring my own interests were protected in ways they couldn't imagine yet. By Sunday night, I had 2 separate contracts finalized. The first stipulated I would only work remotely, with limited on-site appearances. The second contract carefully outlined consultation on industry best practices without specifically mentioning the first organization. Both contracts included language about my ownership of any processes or tools I developed. On Monday morning, my first official day as the founder and CEO of my consultancy, I sat at the dining room table, my new office, with my laptop open, wearing a blouse I'd ironed for the first time in weeks. My spouse paused on the way out to a physical therapy shift. "You sure about this?" I nodded, though my stomach was churning with doubt. First payment should hit our account by noon, $40,000. They let out a long breath. "And if they realize they are paying you to work for their competitor?" "I'm not working for their competitor. I'm consulting for 2 separate clients on non-overlapping projects," I said, looking them in the eye. "I've reviewed the contracts a dozen times. Everything I'm doing is legal and ethical." "Maybe not completely ethical," a small voice whispered, but I silenced it. After my spouse left, I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering myself. Then I dialed into the emergency meeting. "The integration pathway is fundamentally flawed," I explained to the team of engineers who'd been flailing for weeks. "Your architecture assumes a linear patient data model, but the client uses a worked model with branching relational elements." "That's not what our analysis showed," stammered the interim director. "Your analysis missed key structural elements in their legacy system," I said, not unkindly, but firmly. "I've outlined the necessary adjustments here." I shared my screen, showing the revised architecture I'd spent the weekend developing. There was silence as they absorbed what I'd presented. "This will require rebuilding half the integration layer," one engineer finally said. "Yes," I agreed, "but it's the only way to make the migration work within the timeline." "How did you identify this so quickly?" the interim director asked, a note of suspicion in their voice. "I've handled 3 similar migrations. This pattern is something you learn to recognize." What I didn't say, I'd already spotted this issue during my interviews months ago. I'd mentioned it as a potential concern. No one had listened. By Wednesday, both companies were dependent on my expertise. One team was implementing my redesign. The other was crafting a new business strategy based on my insights about healthcare data architecture trends, insights that would position them to capture clients dissatisfied with the first company's services. At home, things were starting to heal. With the first payment, we'd caught up on bills. My spouse found a physical therapy practice interested in bringing them on as a partner rather than an employee, a better opportunity than they'd had before. My older child still barely spoke to me, but I'd seen them looking at me differently when I was on video calls, commanding respect from executives. My younger one crawled into my lap one evening as I was reviewing code. "Are you the boss now, Mommy?" I smoothed their hair. "I guess I am, sweetheart." "Good," they said firmly. "Because you're smarter than all of them." 2 weeks into the contracts, the inevitable happened. The executive from the first company requested an urgent call. "We have a situation," they began, voice tight. "It's come to our attention that you may be consulting for another health system concurrently with your work for us." I'd prepared for this moment. "That's correct," I said calmly. "My consultancy has multiple clients in the healthcare sector." "This represents a clear conflict of interest." "No, it doesn't," I interrupted. "My contract with your organization specifically addresses this. Section 7.3 states that I may provide services to other clients, including competitors, provided I maintain confidentiality of proprietary information. I've adhered to that completely." The intent is clearly spelled out in the language your legal team approved," I said. "If you're concerned about the arrangement, you're welcome to terminate our contract. Of course, the initial payment is non-refundable, and you'd still need to resolve the project issues within the next 4 weeks." Silence stretched between us. We both knew they had no choice. The deadline was immovable, and I was more than halfway through implementing a solution no one else fully understood. "I want daily progress reports," they finally said. As specified in the contract, I agreed pleasantly. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. I'd stood my ground. I hadn't raised my voice or shown anger. I'd simply refused to be intimidated. My phone buzzed with a text from the director at the second company. Heard about the call. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I replied. Still on for tomorrow's strategy session. 3 weeks later, I delivered the completed integration architecture to the first organization, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The migration test ran perfectly. The client executives were so impressed, they increased their contract value by 30%. The executive called me personally. The board is extremely pleased with the outcome, they said, sounding like the words cost them physically. We'd like to discuss retaining your consultancy for ongoing support. I'd be happy to send over our standard long-term contract, I said. My rates have adjusted based on market demand. I named a figure 20% higher than my crisis rate. They didn't even blink. Draw up the paperwork. 2 days later, I finalized a strategic roadmap presentation for the second organization. The director was ecstatic. This positions us perfectly to expand into exactly the market segments where the competitor is vulnerable, they said. The board wants to offer you an exclusive contract. I appreciate that, I said, but my business model depends on working with multiple clients across the industry. I'm happy to prioritize your projects, but I can't accept exclusivity. They studied me through the video call. You're consulting for them long-term now, aren't you? I smiled. My client list is confidential, as you know. Clever, they said with a small laugh. Very clever. 6 months after being cut loose, my consulting firm had 5 employees, specialists I'd worked with over the years who were eager to join a company that valued their expertise properly. We had contracts with 7 major healthcare systems, including both of the big players. We'd moved from our rental into a house we purchased in a good school district. My younger child had the support they needed. My older one had made friends on the high school track team. My spouse was thriving in a new practice. And me? I was working harder than ever, but on my own terms. No one could fire me. No one could uproot my family again. I'd built something unbreakable from the ruins of what had once tried to break me. One rainy Tuesday, I received a calendar invitation from the executive. Quarterly business review, it read. Standard for our ongoing relationship. What wasn't standard was the location, a coffee shop downtown. Not headquarters. Not a video call. I arrived 5 minutes early, ordered a cappuccino, and chose a table with a clear view of the door. The executive walked in, looking distinctly uncomfortable outside the corporate environment, their tailored suit at odds with the casual setting. Thank you for meeting me, the executive said after ordering his own coffee. I wanted to discuss something off the record. Go ahead, I said, weariness creeping in. He took a deep breath. I'm leaving the company. The board has asked me to step down. I kept my face neutral, though surprise rippled through me. I'm sorry to hear that. He shook his head. Don't be. It's been coming since the medical crisis. The truth is, the company has been mismanaged for years. Cutting you was just one symptom of a deeper problem. Why are you telling me this? I asked. He looked me straight in the eye. Because the board is considering offering you the Chief Technology Officer position. I nearly choked on my coffee. Excuse me. You've demonstrated exceptional technical leadership. The entire integration division now runs on your architecture. The board recognizes that letting you go was a catastrophic error. The irony was so perfect, I almost laughed. I'm not interested in being an employee again, I said. My consultancy is profitable and growing. They are prepared to acquire it, he said. Full valuation plus a 3-year leadership contract for you at double your current consulting rates. Now I did laugh, a soft, disbelieving sound. They want to buy the company they inadvertently created when they fired me. He had the grace to look ashamed. Essentially, yes. I took a slow sip of my coffee, thinking of all the sleepless nights, the tears, the devastation their careless decision had caused my family. And now they wanted to throw money at the problem, to buy back not just my expertise, but my loyalty. Please tell the board I'm flattered by their interest, I said carefully. But my company isn't for sale. Not to them, not to anyone. They'll offer more, he warned. It's not about the money, I replied. It's about never again putting my family's security in someone else's hands. He nodded slowly. I understand. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. He hesitated. And I owe you an apology. What happened to you and your family? It was unconscionable. I should have intervened. Yes, I agreed. You should have. We finished our coffee talking about industry trends and mutual connections. As we were leaving, he paused at the door. One more thing you should know. That other health system is also preparing an acquisition offer for your company. I smiled. I'm aware. His eyebrows rose. And they'll receive the same answer. We remain independent. Walking to my car, I felt a sense of completion washing over me. This hadn't been about revenge, not really. It had been about rebuilding, not just my career or my family's stability, but my own sense of power and agency. 3 weeks later, I signed a joint venture agreement with a small but innovative health tech startup founded by 3 women who had faced similar corporate betrayals. Together, we launched a platform that would help hospitals manage patient data more effectively than either of the 2 big players could offer. The first hospital network was our first client. The second largest from the company that had fired me became our second. The day we announced the venture, I received a text from the recruiter who'd originally brought me into the company. Saw the news. Poetic justice. Proud of you. I didn't respond. I didn't need that approval anymore. That evening, I sat on our back deck watching my partner toss a football with our older child, while our younger one practiced cartwheels in the grass. My phone buzzed with another partnership inquiry, from a hospital system looking to escape their contract with the company that had let me go. Everything okay? My partner called, noticing me looking at my phone. Everything's perfect, I said, setting the phone aside. And for the first time in a very long time, I meant it. The company that thought I was disposable had created their own most formidable competitor. The job they'd taken from me had forced me to create something far more valuable. The security they'd stolen from my family had been replaced by something no one could ever take away. That wasn't revenge. That was justice. And justice, I discovered, tastes sweeter than revenge ever could. That's how I turned the worst professional betrayal of my life into the best decision I never planned. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your own story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you bounced back too. See you in the next one.